We're at the November DIGFM meeting. The key presentation is going to be FileMaker Server for Linux and beyond by Simon Brown. But this is Jay Gonzales. I'm with Beezwax, Claris partner, and I want to do an introduction. Some news from Claris about Claris Engage and beyond, what's happened and what's to come. So as you probably know, Claris had their annual developer conference in August as a 2-day virtual event. I'm going to share a little bit about what happened at Engage and news since then and what's on the horizon for the future. First, a disclosure. Claris, and it's interesting, Claris gave us these slides. They asked partners to present this info at events. And I thought it would be kind of marketing-ish and didn't know if it would be a good fit for DIGFM, but they really put some thought into this for this audience and also, general audience about of interest in Claris products. I edited it down a bit, but I think it's some of the best content they provided. And the reason is there's so much going on at Claris right now and in the Claris community. I found a lot of good info that we all might have missed, and I certainly did. So the content from Claris Engage is really starting to add up now. And plus they sponsor this WebEx. So as DIGFM, we're going to give them a mention and some love, and hopefully the next 7 minutes or so will be at least, as good as any ads playing before your favorite YouTube video, right? A lot has happened since August, including this month. I'll talk, quickly about on-session demands. These are at Claris Academy and Claris YouTube channel. So there's a couple places you can find them. I know for a while there was a lot of content being put up, but by Claris, but the Engage content is all there, and those are two really good places to find it. A few, in case you missed it, highlights, including some DIGFM attendee highlights and product news and where you can find more learning resources. And I've tried to keep it relevant to this audience of professional FileMaker developers at DIGFM. So it was, Claris Engage in August was online for unfortunate reasons with COVID, but travel costs were low and we connected across time zones. So, and I think they've been able to generate and publish a lot more content than ever, again, on Claris Academy or the Claris YouTube channel. And these are some of the categories where they've organized content.
Hey, Jay, are you sharing a screen right now?
Yeah. Oh, I am. Can you not see it? Sorry. That would help, wouldn't it? Yeah. All right, there we go. Can you see that?
I see it.
Okay, great. Well, I don't think you missed much, but intro, this is what I'm going to cover. These are some of the topics that they've covered. And here's some highlights Claris has shared. There were twice as many Engage registrations people-wise as there were for DevCon in the past. Part of it's being virtual, so many more people could attend from around the world. 26,000 individual session registrations, 90,000 social media interactions, but it's probably several 100,000 more if you count on the community and meetups and Slack, channels and forums. There are a lot out there, and there are 50 plus total sessions. Claris has been promoting some of the on-demand sessions. One example, they're featuring some expert female voices, or let's just say, expert voices, period. 25%, but it's notable, 25% of the on-demand sessions were produced by women. And these are a few of them. I actually looked, Heather McHugh has been around a long time and well known for writing the white paper that still exists as the de facto Bible for FileMaker with HIPAA. It hasn't been updated in a while, but she's her session is pretty good. Melissa Ann McGee is someone who I don't know, but I was blown away by her session about accessibility because she really did a good job of covering it as a topic that's not often covered in FileMaker development, and it's really relevant to UX design for that matter. And then Laramie Erickson covered iOS human interface guidelines, and it's really good if you're interested in UX design. And so I wanted to highlight, these are some Claris Engage on-demand sessions featuring the DIGFM community. These are all people who registered for this meetup. Laura Betts, Darren Southern, Darren, I saw you here. Sean A. Kruger, Wim DeCourt, Vince Minano, Fabio Basicio, Jeremy Brown. Actually, Jeremy's not here, I don't think, but he spoke at DIGFM recently. And then Bev, I think, might be here. She was awarded the Leader of the Year award. So it's great to see, people we know and who are here at DIGFM that were either speakers or featured people at Claris Engage. And this is kind of the corporate news about Claris, but they are making investments in products, people, teams, product lines, and including FileMaker and Claris Connect. Some new executives, Peter Nelson, VP of Engineering, Britta Meyer-Rock, who's the VP of Marketing, and increased the number of Claris partners by 55% worldwide, and launched Claris Academy. And notably, there's I think still the offer for free FileMaker developer subscription through the end of the year for people impacted by COVID. So workers and other people who might have need for it, check it out. And this is some of the announcing of the future vision. So I know there's been some questions lately about, what, there's always the questions. What is Claris planning to do? And, I think they did a pretty good job, and some of this was missed. 2 months later, we're not thinking about it, but the idea of intelligent apps, automation, recognizing both low code and pro code, and things like both on-premise and cloud, and a lot of the ideas of insight, action, outcomes across app design. But I want to remind everyone that they have been talking about the future, so the roadmap is still there. Claris Engage is happening. Japan is happening now, and they've been translating a lot of the sessions from Engage to other languages: German, French, Italian, Spanish, notably. And some product news. I think you've all pretty much seen this, so I won't go into much detail, but FileMaker Pro 19.1.3. Some of the highlights are add-ons, which we're all, we are still coming to grips with best practices and what they are, what they're good for. But the ones that are bundled with Claris FileMaker Pro are things like barcode creator and simple chart. And there's a bunch from third parties that are coming out now. And a quick start experience. Some of this are missed. That we missed this a little bit, but are starting to look at it more. It's really a drag and drop in-app way to build an app. So within FileMaker Pro, kind of, it's low code, but it's kind of a neat UI and user experience to check out, even if you don't need it for your professional development life. And it's kind of a peek at the future too of things that they've talked about and announced on the roadmap. And FileMaker Server, which we're going to talk about. But one thing that came up at Engage, and is notable. They're talking about the future, right? Things they're committed to, AI, machine learning. Some of this is in the Engage Claris Academy or YouTube channel, so I won't go too much into it. But they were, giving concrete examples of prototypes that they've done now from R&D internally at Claris. And Android, which we talked a little bit about, but they're partnering with a company that's built an Android client for FileMaker, and they've been announcing publicly the desire for beta testers, alpha testers for this. And I'll finish this with a reminder of the resources from Claris Engage. There's 50, maybe 60. 2 months ago, it was 35, and now it's up to 50 or 60 sessions that are on demand. And there is a Claris Relive Engage page, which this is the URL. content.claris.com/relive_engage_2020. And that has some links to keynote sessions, videos, other content. So,
Hey, Jay,
yeah.
when did Engage officially end?
Well, it was 2 days, so it was only the 2 days in August, like the 5th and 6th, I think.
Okay, but that all the on-demand sections and things, they were streaming in for a while.
They rolled those out in the weeks after. I mean, even up till a few weeks ago, maybe there's still some more that they have up their sleeve. But that's why the content, like things blew my mind to see some of those sessions I hadn't seen. And then I started to put, look at this and actually watch more of the sessions. So yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, there's multiple sessions on, there's 8 or 9 or 10 sessions on design, and like usual, there's a good mix, but it's more. If you stop paying attention to Engage in September, there's a lot more stuff since then.
And where do we get these slides? Where'd you get them?
They gave them to partners, so I wasn't going to share them, but most of this stuff is discoverable pretty easily. The Engage content is on Claris's site, and it's in there's different ways to attack it. Claris Academy, I didn't love that. You sign up and it guides you through it, but if you want to see the sessions on your own, go to the YouTube channel, and they're all there in one spot. Or you can pick the different tracks, like design or sort of servers and systems and security, DevOps type stuff, or development, scripting and custom functions and programming oriented stuff, and JavaScript and so on.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. That was great.
Sure. Well, thanks for your time, everyone. I hope that was useful.
So, who's next, Jay?
Well, I guess I am. Yeah, I'm actually not planning on presenting for the whole rest of the hour, but I think at least 20, 25 minutes we can go through this. And actually, I wanted to actually do a full demo of deploying FileMaker for Linux, and I must have been really lucky, or maybe because I was plugged in before, and it was going much faster than it's when I was just testing it now. So it's taking a little more time to do that. So might split the time between doing a new deployment and what we can actually work with once it's deployed. So anyways, yeah, my name's Simon Brown. I work at Beezwax and do a lot of server-related work, integration work between systems. Between us and our clients, we've got a really wide variety of environments that we work with. Everything from small little, small and pop nonprofits to some corporate clients, and they all seem to have different situations and environments to work with. What we wanted to talk about was specifically FileMaker for Linux, which kind of melds in a bit into just the new release that we got just recently, FileMaker, 19.1.2. So I'm mostly just interested here in just talking about, at least for the initial part of the presentation, at least, about just the Linux version in the beginning. So maybe later we can kind of split off from there. Let's see. I guess I should probably share my screen here. Let's see. All right, I think that worked. I would just say also, complimenting, what Jay was saying about, how we have a lot more technical information available. Probably a lot of you heard about this already, but there is the Claris engineering blog. So that might be, a good starting point sometimes for some technical topics that you might encounter. For instance, we were just talking a little while ago about some changes in SSL that have happened recently. This goes over some SSL related issues. And I believe this one also talks about the new ECC ciphers being used, which is basically a new type of SSL certificate, which might give us slightly better performance with SSL. That's, of course, in addition to the regular knowledge-based articles. I did some digging around, and I couldn't actually find a lot of information that was specific to Linux. So, you're going to have to kind of dig around and look for just general information that's probably going to be sort of cover all the platforms and just kind of find out any specific Linux related topics that you're interested in. Let's see, get my mouse over there. So, as you may know, in ancient times there was a Linux version before this one, back in FileMaker 5.5. We had somewhat briefly, a Linux version back then. I don't know how widely it was deployed or used. I kind of was just beginning to use FileMaker back then, and I didn't know of anybody who was using it. So now, after all these years, we finally have one, and I think part of the question is why you want to use it. So one situation that happens with a lot of our clients, their first impulse might be to get a Windows server and deploy it on that, and that's not a bad way to go, and actually has a few positive points to it that we might talk a bit about later. But a lot of times, unless the client is site licensed, a lot of times we get into some logistical issues as far as getting licensing, either between the cost of it, between how to get it, how many CALs do you need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of those kinds of questions, it can bog down the process and make it harder to get the deployment going. So that's, of course, CentOS, which is what FileMaker Server for Linux is running on. That is, of course, free. So it's just a matter of getting a VM or a host that we can deploy it onto. So definitely still a lot of things to cover there, but at least it removes kind of one point of friction in the deployment process. Yeah, and I should cover one thing too. So specifically, they want us to deploy this on CentOS 7.8. CentOS 8 is actually more in the becoming more mainstream now. 7.8 is kind of on its way out, although it's going to be supported until I guess that's end of June 2024. So it's definitely got some life to it. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future we see it supporting CentOS 8, but at least right now it's 7.8 is what we need. Anyways, going back to the reasons why we want to use it. I think another benefit is, at least for the work that we've done, a lot of times we're leveraging services or libraries or something that deploy very easily on Linux. That's sort of like their first home. So for certain kinds of integration work, we find it really natural to work with Linux-based systems, and so I think that's kind of another plus. That may be partly in nature of the fact that we do a lot of Ruby Rails-based work, which also is very much Linux-centric as well. But I think that's another kind of nice plus. And another thing is, it's Linux has a pretty light touch on the hardware. You get a system that's pretty stripped down, and so perhaps the hardware requirements or the VM requirements will be a little lower with Linux, partly because you are sacrificing, in most cases, some people might still prefer to actually deploy a desktop, a windowing environment on their Linux servers, but most of us are doing it with just command line access only, and so that kind of lowers quite a bit of the resource requirements for the server. There's some, definitely some discussion going on right now about performance. Is it faster than Windows? Is it faster than Mac OS? Et cetera, et cetera. It seems like we've seen some sort of numbers kind of both ways. So I think we're going to have to kind of wait for the dust to settle on that, or it may be in a kind of case where it sort of depends on what your platform is and how you're using it, whether you get better performance or not. But I think we can say with some certainty that it's roughly equivalent, certainly, as to what you get on Mac OS or Windows. Possibly better, possibly worse, but not by some huge factor. Let's see. So, oh yeah, I should mention also, going back to the platform, I know they were asking us at the time of ETS to actually test out Red Hat, which is a very close cousin to CentOS. But they really are specifying CentOS at this point. So I'm guessing that they were never able to work out some issues using Red Hat. So we're really just staying on that one platform.
Hey, Simon, I have a question about that. Is there a particular reason why CentOS is the one that they're focusing on?
It's a little bit hard to say. I mean, there are differences, like, say, contrasting CentOS with Ubuntu. It could be something as simple as just the libraries that are part of CentOS 7.8 were just more closely aligned with what they were using. Ubuntu tends to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say bleeding edge, but a little bit more closer to the what's current, whereas sort of CentOS is kind of a more conservative distribution of Linux, and so that might have had something to do with it, or it may just be a matter of familiarity for the engineers. They just happen to be more familiar with CentOS than they were with, say, the Unix version. I'm sorry, Ubuntu version of Linux.
I did. Another thing I might want to mention is it sounds like the mic that you're using might be brushing up against something. We're getting a little bit extra.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that could be actually. Yeah, here, let me see if I can do it here. Okay, how's that? Hopefully that'll be better. Yeah, okay, so we need we're gonna need a CentOS system. When they first deployed FileMaker Cloud, deploying on systems as small as, I guess is that still 2 cores? I think it was 2 cores and like 2.5 gigs of RAM. And the thought was that could support possibly up to 5 users. Later on, with later versions of FileMaker Cloud, they kind of made the baseline a 2-core, 8 gig of RAM system, and that's probably about where I'd start out if I was doing a VM on most systems now. Would be at the very least the starting point would be something around range. But the nice thing about using something like a virtual private cloud server, be it Linode or AWS or Azure, is you can deploy that system and scale it up as needed. So you can kind of see how much capacity you really need, assuming you're able to do some appropriate load testing on your system. Okay, so there are feature differences. It's fairly feature-wise, it's fairly compatible, but I guess one kind of new thing we don't have right now is, as far as I know, there's no Claris Connect on-premise connector. I don't know if how familiar you guys are with those, but if you have it's especially handy if you have a system on your private network, and you want to be able to open up the connectivity between Claris Connect and your FileMaker server, but you don't want to have to fiddle around with firewalls and things like that. It's Claris, the deploying that connector makes it really easy to get a connection, and it's fairly secure because it's really just that connector talking to the Claris Connect servers, and hopefully it'll reduce any issues that you might have, firewalls and things like that. There's certainly other ways of doing it. You can open up the needed ports, the needed IP addresses, but I think that's probably a really good way to go if you can use it. But at least for now on Linux, it looks like we don't currently have that yet. Another instance that might something else that might come up for you is if you want to use external authentication. There are a number of methods that are supported, but a lot of us are kind of used to being able to just bind an OS to either Active Directory or Open Directory, and then just click that one button in the FileMaker admin console, and boom, you've got your external authentication all set up. Well, I'll cover. There actually is an alternative, but I'm going to talk about that just a little bit later. Something else that we don't have, and this shouldn't be a huge surprise, is XML and PHP using the FileMaker libraries. That is that is not present in the Linux version. As I mentioned before, there's no GUI, and not only that, but of course there's no FileMaker Pro version of for Linux either. And so you may say, well, it's the server. Why do we care? I think where it has been nice a lot of times to have that FileMaker Pro client is sometimes for actually debugging with server-side scripts. In some cases, you might find it convenient to actually run FileMaker Pro on your server and see if you can replicate the issue or just prototype the issue there. In addition, as a plugin developer, I found it a little bit more challenging to debug plugins if your only way of actually testing out your plugin is by using server-side scripts. There's not as much. It's harder to get your feedback as far as what is or isn't working, or where you're crashing, or where your data is getting misaligned or something like that. I would say, though, you can possibly use the GDB debugger if you're doing plugin work. You might possibly consider that. Basically, attach GDB to the FileMaker server process, and then set your breakpoints at wherever you need them in your plugin. And then you might be able to get some feedback that way, but at least you'll know when a particular function gets hit, even if you're not necessarily able to get a lot of context in what's going on. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, another kind of an obscure thing is if you're using the Tableau connector with OData, and I definitely wouldn't have found this out if I hadn't been looking at the notes carefully. There's an issue. Timestamp data from applications hosted by FileMaker Server to Tableau via OData do not work. Tableau desktop. So I don't know if that means you'd be okay with Tableau server. Just as an aside, we've working with the Tableau folks on something called a taco. That makes it pretty easy to hook up between Tableau and a FileMaker server, especially if you're using broader sets of data where the data connector is a little bit more limited or a little more tightly focused. So the taco gives you kind of a bigger palette of things to choose from in your system. So I don't know, maybe Vince could talk about that if he's still around. There is ODBC support with DSS, but some differences you're gonna have to deal with here are, actually pull up that link, I've got it right here. So you can see actually this nice chart here. And you can see that we've got kind of quite a few things here. We're missing 11G, Oracle 11G access, or 2 access, but we've got 12CR1, 12CR2, we've got MS SQL, and we've also got MySQL. We don't have Postgres, which is kind of one that I'd like to have, but we probably, the majority of our deployments are probably actually using MySQL still, but we're definitely seeing a lot more interest in using Postgres than we used to. Let's see.
Simon, we have a few questions out here on the,
okay.
chat. Can you see those, or would you like us to read those to you?
Let's see. I had those. Darn it! I had those showing for me before, and now they've. Oh, because I'm sharing again. Yeah. Remember the.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got from Stephen. He's asking, are we going to see an installation process on Linux? I guess he's asking whether that's going to appear today.
Yes. yeah, the hope is we can do that.
Okay, and then who else? Will FM Server on Linux ever support single sign-on with PAM modules and Kerberos to allow a domain-joined Linux system to authenticate user sessions?
Oh yeah, I kind of skipped over that. Something that Linux does have that on-premise does not have is something called ADFS integration. So ADFS is it's Active Directory Forest. I can't remember what the S is for. But Forest Service? I don't know. So it's commonly known as ADFS in any event. And basically, if your AD infrastructure is set up appropriately, basically with ADFS enabled, you may or may not need a ADFS proxy server to go with it. But you're gonna be able to then hook your Linux system into that ADFS system, and so you can get AD integration, which is going through that. So that's one way you can do it, and then make sure I have it correct. So I'm actually going to open this up on the server, which hopefully hasn't kicked me out, and it did. Okay. Oops. I can remember the password. Okay. So if we go in here and actually, yeah. Okay. So actually, that's all we need. So you can see here, we still have the ability to do Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. That would be Microsoft Azure authentication. So you've basically got these 4 different ways of doing it, and this one can be to some arbitrary service. So I believe that you can also hook that up to, for instance, if you are using, for instance, Okta, which is an identity provider service. I believe you can also hook up in that ADFS integration method. There might be some caveats to that, as far as you might have to have a certain type of certain level of service from Okta in order to do that. But that might be at least one possible way to go as far as getting some sort of more, sort of OAuth type authentication going. So hopefully that answers their question.
And I see Tony White has some questions here. Tony's able to unmute or not to ask them. But
maybe I can make them more clear than what I wrote. I'm not a server expert. That said, I've deployed a few things on. We do a lot of the Mac Minis because I got background. So we run shell scripts that do as much work as possible. A previous presentation, I heard talk about config files, which I haven't seen myself. I believe they exist for the Linux server. I'm wondering if they're human readable, such that they can be programmatically generated. There used to be some of the files in some of the server versions previously, they were hashed or encrypted or something like that. I'm just wondering if these are human readable and therefore machine writable, so you could automate the deployment.
Well, the auto assist is that is supported. I believe that's mentioned in the release notes. I haven't actually played around with that myself. Yeah, I'm not going to find it quickly. But there is definitely some documentation on how you can use basically have a scripted deployment using those settings. It seems to have actually been enhanced from what it was before. What we use for Mac OS or Windows.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll have a look. That'd be awesome. We keep a FileMaker database of all the settings and whatnot. So, we
I
could.
mean, another possibility too is if you just, either scrape the results of the FMS admin, was it FMS admin get server config and FMS admin get CWE config. Well, actually, I guess there is no CWE config on Linux actually. So I guess that would just be the server config, or you can also go in straight to that XML file, which used to be encrypted, but now is largely plain text. There's the XML file that has all the settings that are in use by your server. Like schedules.
If it went from encrypted to plain text, that would open up the door.
Yeah. I don't know exactly when they change. I can't tell you for sure exactly when they changed that, but somewhere around like 15 or 16, I think.
Oh, that's very cool. It's a good thing. I never quite understood why it was encrypted. But
Where is this file at?
Okay, well, let's see. We can cd/FileMaker data/preferences. Oops. Here, I'll just do more. Yes. That one, right? So yeah, you can see if there were schedules in here, you'd see that. If there'd like been email configuration set up, you'd see that. But you can see, like, for instance, use some keys and things. So those settings are all, you can find those settings there. Backup target, that would be like the default backup location, for instance, right there.
Nice.
Okay, so let's see, anything else I missed here? I guess one other thing too, there was kind of a little nice discovery, and I don't know, maybe this actually slipped in with the 19.1 build, I'm not sure. So many of my systems, I've actually been just doing upgrades. I haven't been doing like clean installs. But at least with the Linux install, OpenJDK is installed by default. So if you're enabling WebDirect, you don't have to go fiddling around with, downloading a tar file and, uploading it to the server, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's all just kind of handled for you when you install FileMaker Server. Yeah, I think that's about it. Okay, so I guess unless there's any more questions, I might actually just jump into, demoing an actual deployment of a system. All right, I guess I'll take that. Yes. So in my case, okay, here we go. In my case, let's get my mouse where it needs to be. I'm going to be deploying this at AWS. But really anybody who is supporting, full stack CentOS 7.8 VPNs will work. So that could be a Linode, that could be, I'm not thinking, could be Azure, it could be any number of places. So lots of options there. So
hey, Simon, real quick.
Yeah.
Christian from Monkey Bread posted, I forget where, what list he did, but he said now when you download CentOS 7, you get 709. It's actually a different build.
Yeah, well, actually, I'm going to cover that because
Okay.
when I do this deployment, so let's see. For some reason, it's not showing me my. It's so super helpful, but it's not showing me. Okay, we're going to go to launch instance, and we're going to do over here, and we're just going to. So it's not specific here, in the case of AWS at least, about which version you're getting. I happen to know that at least the last time I did this, I got CentOS 7.7. So it's since this is the ones that are from CentOS specifically, that's the one I'm going to start with. There are definitely other images you could possibly use. provided by other people, but just, you know, being safe, I'm going to so I'm going to select that image. So here's, you know, where we get into, you know, a trade-off with going really big is as you get bigger systems, you can, you know, quite expensive. And just be aware that, you know, 30 cents an hour doesn't seem too expensive until you multiply that out by, you know, 24 hours, 30 days. It starts to kind of add up to serious. So another issue too is with the way AWS works. Depending on where you're deploying it to, you have different options. You don't always have all these different options to choose from, even though it's showing me here, you know, all these different options. There's a lot of these actually that I can't deploy in this particular availability zone that I'm using right now. So anyways, that's just informational. So I'm going to click through that screen. So what I'm going to use, so you can see you can get this very small system for free, even with a new AWS account. But I don't. I'd be afraid to try running FileMaker Server in something that small. So, like I said, I'm going to say that T2 Medium is kind of like a good lower rung deployment that I can do. Let's see, get you out of the way. In my case, I'm deploying into Virginia. That's actually something that's important to check before you actually deploy it, because you can't, oddly enough, you can't just move servers around at AWS. Wherever you started at, that's where it stays. And moving systems from one zone to another is actually a little bit of a pain. Not hard, but a little bit of a pain. So I want to be sure you're in the right zone, availability zone. And so, like I said, we don't have anything in North Virginia, so that's the one I'm going to use. Some zones, by the way, have different prices, so you may want to also kind of factor that into where you choose to deploy something. Some areas are more expensive than others. Let's see, we should be able to use default settings. I only hesitate slightly because at least once I somehow deployed it without a public IP, but I think that's all correct. I also like to, oops, not that one. I actually also like to hit that, which is just a little extra protection so that you don't accidentally terminate a server at AWS, because if you terminate a server at AWS, typically the data goes with it. So you can very quickly blow out all your data, you know, if you're not careful. So good to have a little extra protection there. All right, let's see. So security. I'm gonna actually wait to do this. Keep this WebEx thing just getting in my way here. Let's see if we can put it up there. Okay. So we will do that later. Oh, actually, hang on. I skipped over. All right. Actually, this is the one I was screwing up. So we're just going to leave it with SSH, but I actually need to add some extra ports here. So obviously for a FileMaker server, we're going to need more access than just SSH. We might also not want to have it world accessible via SSH, but at least to get going here for right now, what I can do is I can say my IP. This is a little shortcut in AWS that basically whatever IP address your browser at the time that you're setting this up is coming from, only that IP address will be allowed in to the server. Oh, hang on. I missed, I should say, 8 gigs, not really a lot. So I'm going to bump that up to 40 for our purposes. That should be more than enough. Let's see, we don't need tags. We already went through network. All right, let's go ahead and launch it. There's actually going to be one other thing that's going to pop up. Okay, so with the way AWS does things, you normally access using an SSH key or a key pair, so you can quite easily just do here and create a new key pair and download that file. Just whatever you do, don't lose track of that file that gets created. In my case, I'm going to use a key pair that I had previously created for this purpose. I just should say it's just really trivial. There's nothing, you name it and then you download it, and that's about as complicated as it gets. So you don't have to run some funky SSH command or anything. I'm sorry, OpenSSL command or something like that. It's quite straightforward. All right, so we're going to go ahead and launch that. Yeah.
Simon, quick question. In the section where you set up, do you need to set up any access for ports, like for example, to server admin, like 16,000? Do you need to open that up as well, or?
Not initially, but yeah, I do need to do that.
Okay.
And the reason I'm holding it a little bit just as a way of kind of maximizing my time, because it takes a little bit for that server to get deployed. So while that is happening,
how long does it take roughly?
Won't take long at all. In fact, let's see if we get to the right screen. Yeah, so it's probably going to take a couple minutes.
Okay.
So while that's chewing away, what I can do is I can then go through the networking part. And where's my groups? Everything's kind of moved around a little bit because of the screen size and also this new interface that they have, which I'm not totally liking. Maybe I'm just going to do it this way. Let's see, and I just have to be sure I know which one it is. Okay, so it's probably this one. All right, so basically here what we're doing is we're configuring the firewall. So as Vince mentioned, we're probably going to want some access to the admin console, especially since there's no desktop on our Linux server to connect to. So the web interface to the FileMaker admin console becomes that much more important. So here, let's see. They don't give me the my IP option. So we'll just do that, I guess. Another port is you need to have at least 80, or you're probably going to want to have at least 443, possibly 80, but probably it would be better if you didn't use 80. So maybe we'll just do 443 here. And that's actually should be one of the fixed ones here. Yep. We'll just do everybody all IP4 addresses. So basically 0000 here means any IP address. That's just their way they do it. Let's see. So HTTPS. What else do we? Oh, 5003. That would be another good one to have. I'm not sure I'll actually have time for this, but if I happen to be deploying Zabbix monitoring, I'd probably want to add this. Let's see. Probably also, if I'm monitoring, it's nice to be able to ping your server. By default, AWS doesn't let you do pings, but we can certainly fix that. Custom IP. And so here, especially on this screen, this is a little tricky. And I sometimes forget which one I want, but I'm pretty sure it's echo request is the one that I want here. Do that again. So again, a lot of these, if you were actually deploying in a real world, you would probably want to restrict it either to a subnet if you could, or if you're in a more advanced situation, maybe you'd have you'd set up VPN access to your FileMaker server at AWS. Would be another way to get around it or to lock it down better. You know, certainly FileMaker Cloud servers. The FileMaker Cloud for AWS servers in their basic deployment. They were world accessible on port 5003 and port 16,000. But as a general rule, you know, we would, if deploying a server for a client, we'd want to try and lock that down further, if at all possible. It can be rather tricky though, especially now with clients, you know, being scattered all over the place. It's harder to get that kind of security, however. So there, unfortunately, are some compromises being made in that regards. Anyways, I think that's about all the network connectivity we need. So we've got 22, so we can get in with a SSH. We've got 16,000, so we can get to the admin console. 443, so that we can upload files using FileMaker Pro to host on the server. We've got 5003, so we can do basic FileMaker Pro to FileMaker Server connectivity. 1050 or 10,000, 10,050 for possible Zabbix monitoring, and then echo request so that I can ping the server to make sure it's really up. Okay. See, now this get in the way again. So keep having to move that. Okay. So after all that's said and done, I think our server is actually up and running at this point. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't show a public IP address. Okay. That's an interesting twist. Okay, let's see. So I need to hook that up. There's actually something by default, or at least normally by default, when you deploy AWS, it gives you an IP address from a pool of addresses, and every time you restart the server, you were to stop the server and then start it back up, it would have a different public IP address. So for that reason, you might use this thing called elastic IPs, and those are basically, you grab that static IP address and say, it's mine, and nobody else can have it, and then you can assign that IP to a server. So my question is, oh, there it is. Problem is, I'm not sure which one it is. So since I don't happen to know which ID is which, I'm going to assume it's that one. So basically, I already had an elastic IP in the pool that I wasn't using. It's free for me to allocate. So I'm going to allocate that IP address to the instance. And let's go back here and see if I actually got the right server. Okay, I think I did get the right server. Okay, so now I have that. Now my server has that public IP address, which I can talk to it. Let's see. So I think that means we can switch over to here now. And I'm going to log off of this guy. And get that IP address. Okay. So, and that's the wrong IP for part of it. So we're going to connect here. I'm just using SS from the terminal. The one kind of little difference here is this -i part, fm-linux demo.pem. So remember when I said when I created the instance that I could either create an SSH key or use an existing one? Well, this is the existing one that I already downloaded for this. So I'm telling SSH, use this SSH key to access this server using the account name CentOS and blah, 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 our IP address. CentOS is the built-in account that the system will be configured with initially. So there's just that one account on there in the beginning. So let's see if that actually works. Okay, so just the normal prompt that I've never seen the server before. I'm sure it's okay to connect. All right. Okay, so as I said before, we're in the server. The server is running. So obviously SSH is working, and we've got a public IP address. So this part is, as I said, that we need to up to from 7.7 to 7.8. So I'm just going to run this guy. Oh, yep. The CentOS command has built-in sudo privileges, so I'm just going to use sudo and stay in sudo. Okay, so this is one of the parts that's taking a little longer than I had the first couple times tried it, so let's hope it goes a little faster than it was. These are basically all the components that are being downloaded, and yes, I do want to do that. And now it's actually updating the system. So 273 pages to go. Let's see here. All right, so I don't know if I get to all these, but some things you're going to want to have handy for this. So we already did the SSH key file. You're also going to want the FileMaker Linux server RPM file. Let's see, I think you get that as a zip file. And if you go into your maintenance FileMaker maintenance page, you should see the Linux download link there already, and you should be able to download the files. But we really only need the one file, which is the RPM file on our server in order to do the actual FileMaker server install. Also, you're probably going to need an SSL certificate. You can use the self-signed certificate to get going. So in this case here, got us an SSL files ready for me to use for this install. In my case, I've actually chained together the intermediate certificates with the server certificate, or the wildcard certificate in this case. So I just have that one file along with the key file that goes with it. So one little kind of logistical thing here is we've got to get this file from wherever it is onto your Linux server. And so what I'm going to do here, there's several ways to do it, but I'm going to do here, and I already have the history. Let's see, I need to get that IP address in a more clean form. Okay, which screen was I on? Okay, here we go. So I'm going to use the SCP command, which is a close cousin to SSH, except SCP is used for transferring files, hence the CP part, which is the copy command that Linux and Unix has. So what I'm saying here is use the SCP command, use that certificate to help me authenticate. Here's the file that I want to copy over, my source. And then here's the destination. And I'm just saying, in my case, just copy it into the root directory. I'm sorry, the home directory for the CentOS user, which is what I'm going to connect as. So you can see we're getting transferred. And then meanwhile, let's see how we're doing. We're still sitting on there. Okay. All right, any questions while we wait just a little bit? I'm hoping just like a few minutes before it hits. Oh, good, it completed. All right. Okay, so now I'm just waiting for the copy. It's going to be about 30 seconds. So any quick questions before I go?
You're showing a custom install here on AWS. Is there a reason and that you would do this as opposed to just like going with the default with a FileMaker Cloud now?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's some features that aren't supported in FileMaker Cloud. Let's see. I think, for instance, one possibly or some clients or systems might be the lack of plugins. There's, in some cases, we've also done certain kinds of connectivity that you could possibly replicate that using a FileMaker Server script, perhaps, which we still recall still have access to with FileMaker Cloud, the 2.x version of it. There's some differences, for instance, in how authentication works to OData. Let me think. Certainly, also with FileMaker Cloud, there's no XML or PHP API, but that's also true for Linux as well. So I think also it could be cost. You know, I was pricing out. We had somebody ask us, well, you know, I've got, I can't remember what the number was. You know, 150 users, concurrent users, 150 concurrent users. You know, how much would that cost at FileMaker Cloud? It was considerable. I think it was kind of like in the $8,000 range, and you know, there's definitely some benefits to that. You know, you'll be able to leverage, you know, FileMaker support because it is, you know, they provide 24/7 support for FileMaker Cloud servers. But you know, if you're not running 24/7, or you know, you don't necessarily, you know, your system doesn't have enough usage to warrant, you know, spending $8,000 a year on a FileMaker Cloud server. You know, it certainly could be a lot more cost competitive to deploy at the same system at AWS if you're willing to, you know, handle the management of the system. Okay, so that file uploaded. So now I should be able to go here, and sure enough, there it is. The FileMaker server installed. So now we're actually ready to install FileMaker. So we actually use yum to install, and we just point it at the RPM file. So the RPM, the FileMaker server RPM has a bunch of dependencies, which it's specified. So you can see these are all various components that FileMaker is pulling in as requirements for FileMaker Server. So we're going to go ahead and say, yeah, sure, go ahead and install those. A lot of these libraries do get installed into FileMaker's own private library location. Sometimes issues you can have on Linux systems in particular is if they happen to be using the OS libraries and somebody says, oh, I need, need RMagic for this and version 7, but there's something else that still wants like 6.7, you can run into some possible conflicts, dependency conflicts that might cause you problems. So it's nice that most of these libraries are getting installed in FileMaker's own private area. So we're going to agree to the license. And so here's where we kind of the fork in the road if we were doing a web worker. But in this case, we want to deploy the primary server, the master server. So we're going to just put 0 there. And now it's prompting us for the account name we're going to use. So use FMS, and I'm just going to use demo 2011. And let's do that again. Okay, so now FileMaker is doing what it needs to do to finish off the installation. One nice thing that got added was and I happened to do, I haven't tried doing this from like a vintage 18 server, but if you have like a 19.0 server, and you wouldn't on Linux, but if you happen to be upgrading a Mac OS or Windows server, you can now upgrade in place. So much as we are used to doing when we mine FileMaker server patches, like when we went from maybe 1801 to 1802, we can now jump farther forward. So you could, I was able to, for the most part, get it to work from ETS versions without even having to do a clean install and just have it pick up all the previous settings without having to re-enter any settings. So I think the plan is that, when there's FileMaker Server 20 comes out or FileMaker Server Next, whatever they end up calling it, that we wouldn't necessarily have to go through that uninstall install process. We might just be able to kind of upgrade in place. This is actually interesting. I think I've seen that at least once before. A little weird to see that pop up for like 4 or 5 seconds. Let's see if this works. The server says starting. Very close. While I do that, let me get prepared here to connect, and we'll see if the admin console actually comes up correctly. Okay. All right, complete. Okay, so in theory, we should have a working server, but let's see what happens when we get this. And yeah, I think it's not working. Okay, actually in the release notes, although the release notes say that you need to reboot, you can, I've found I can just alternately just do this. And for some reason, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Okay, so if we want to check on the status of the system, let's see, for some of the components at least, we can, And it's normal for a couple of these to say failed, but here you can see actually for the HTTPD, the Apache process, basically all 4 of them are said to have failed. Although the main file service, helper service, is running, so that's a good thing. So it's actually, as I said, it's actually in the release notes that we need to either to reboot. Although, as I said, what I found is I can just do this instead. HTTP server, and let's see what that does now. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of a change there in the status of the service. So that means I should be able to go here now. He said, make sure it didn't. Well, of course, every other time I've done this, it's worked. Let's see. Just check that one time. All right, well, maybe we will actually do a reboot. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. So yeah, that was kind of a little minor glitch you might have to deal with. There is actually one other glitch, and I've this on Mac OS systems as well. I don't know. I'd actually kind of be interested to know if anybody else has had any experience with this. But I've been finding. Let me go back here. One of the recommended things that you do, starting with this version, is you run this built-in system script, and basically what that's doing is it's purging your cache on your FileMaker server. And the idea is they're recommending that we do this every day, ideally when the system is fairly not being used hardly at all. Presumably, it's mainly a performance impact that they're worried about. But what I've been finding is actually on my Linux server is that sometimes after the script runs, I'm having to restart either the Apache process or sometimes the admin console process. And I've also had a little bit of less consistently, but I've also had some odd issues when I try and run it on a Mac OS system, a Mac OS VM that we have as well. So it seems like based on what they're saying here, it seems like a really good thing to do, but at this point, I'm kind of having trouble implementing that particular recommendation. All right, so our server should be back by now. Okay, let's see what we're doing here.
Simon, this is Chris Moyer. The other day I was watching Douglas Wallace do this whole presentation, and he suggested that purge script would be kind of a panacea for people who have those ghost sessions hanging around on their server when someone falls off and that zombie session doesn't get disconnected. I haven't tried it or anything like that, but and he's, I guess, I'm not sure his official title, but he's more or less the SE for the EU. But that was his characterization of the use of that feature.
Huh. Yeah, I mean that's definitely it's not as bad a problem for us as it has been in the past, but we definitely have still been seeing that issue. So if there was a fix for that, that would definitely be a nice thing. but he didn't say anything about it not working though, or causing other problems. Okay, well, maybe I've just been unlucky on that front. I'm not sure, or maybe that was a system that had been upgraded from ETS, so maybe there was some just leftover gremlin on that particular Linux server. So I meant to try it on one of these test systems that I set up, but I never got around. Unfortunately, never got around to it. Okay, so let's see where our FileMaker processes are. Oh, you know what? I think I need to do that. I don't remember which case they used. Okay, I think this is better. All right. He said, all right, maybe let me just make sure I got the right IP address, because that is not working. 22.2. Seems like the right IP address. Well, I guess we should check that I didn't somehow do my security group wrong. Oh, you do this slightly differently. Security groups. Okay. Ah, okay. So you know what? Maybe after all that, I might have actually used the wrong one. Maybe what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cheat, kind of. I'm going to go back to my instance. Where are you? This. And I'm going to go here. And come on, scroll. And rather than where did they move the edit button? I want to just change the security group that it's using, and they have moved it. Darn it. Okay. Security. Security groups. One works. Not sure if I got that right, but we'll find out pretty quick. And the answer is no. All right. Let's go back. Yeah, firewalls are oftentimes a source of fun. Although usually not so hard on something really basic like this. So I guess we're just going to redo it. And let me just save this, and that should be enough to at least get that far, right? Aha. All right. Okay, so it's going to complain about this. I could either go ahead, of course, with the default. I guess I'll just I'll just go ahead and import it since I've got those files handy. If I can just remember where I put them. Okay. And like I said, since I got it chained all together, and I've got the key, and it's even a password key for this, so it's about as easy as it gets to get a certificate in. And now my browser window is too small and not showing me the button. Let's see. Okay. All right. So I can actually leave, since I've stripped the password off the key in this case, and I can actually just go ahead and import it without a key. So it's going to want to do a restart in order to use the key. So here's where that system control command, for instance, comes into play again. So if we go here and we tell system control stop, that's sort of the equivalent of going in, for Windows. That's the equivalent of going into the services control panel and stopping the FileMaker service. Rather than reboot again, I can just do this and restart FileMaker. Again, let's check though and make sure we're okay. We're probably okay. And and actually, so yeah, I can't actually show it if I was using a host name right now, but that would require me setting up the host name and DNS. So I'm gonna have to stick with this, but let's see. You can see now that it's using the certificate correctly, even though because I'm using the IP address, it's still complaining about the oops, still complaining about that. All right, so there we are. I guess one other thing, and this is AWS specific, is okay, you've got this server set up now. What about backups? Because one thing to keep in mind with AWS in particular is they how do I put this? They do not. They're less than. They don't really guarantee that your server is, 4.9. You're not necessarily getting 4 nines on an EC2 server. I mean, more than likely you are, but we don't have that many servers. We have a fair number of servers that we work with on AWS, but we've definitely had at least 2 of them kind of just sort of suddenly conk out. And the never been a case of losing any data, but it just sort of reminds you that you want to be backing up your data somehow. You want to be getting it off of your EC2 instance and putting it somewhere else. They have added some actions. I'm not sure if they're exposed here now, and they're not. It used to be kind of actually a little hard to set up backups with AWS, but they've done two separate improvements that makes it fairly easy to now set up regular snapshot backups, file system snapshot backups of your server. So as long as the FileMaker server backups are running, those file system snapshots will be copied or backed up in the file system snapshots. As many of you know, you can't rely a file system backup of a live FileMaker Pro database file is probably not going to be too helpful for you. It might be a source of, might be able to salvage some data from it, perhaps, but there's a fair chance you might just get a corrupted file back that you can't even open. So you really need to also have your FileMaker server backups. My inclination is that I pretty much always just do this. And then I'll go in here and because I'd rather explicitly have control over my backup schedules, and rather than having that sort of invisible backup schedule that it creates for us. I'm sure you guys know how to set that up. All right, well, I think that's basically it. Like I said, there's, another thing with AWS in particular to be aware of is, like I said, because of those the possibility that your EC2 system will become unavailable. Another good thing to do, which unfortunately they've made, to my mind, a little harder to set up, is you can go in here and you can create something called a CloudWatch alarm. And then basically the metric that you're looking for is, oh, there it is. Where are you? Status check. So you could either do individual ones based on these, but if you just do this one, status check failed, either system or is that system or instance. So if either of those triggers fail, and I would probably do it for at least 2 consecutive periods. By default, the minimum you can check is every 5 minutes. If you pay a little extra, you can get more frequent checks. Anyways, set that up because that will actually notify you if your system becomes unavailable. In addition, of course, I talked about possibly setting up Zabbix monitoring. So you could actually use Zabbix both via a ping test as well as other monitoring that you can configure with that to actually check that your system is working correctly. So, yeah, at that point, any questions?
There's a question from Robert. How do you download a backup of one of your DB files?
Yeah. So, if you're fluent in the terminal, you can do that with SCP as well. Admittedly, even I find that a little awkward sometimes to do. So a lot of times, for that kind of situation, what I might actually set up is use a client like transmit. Okay.
I mean, the admin console, doesn't the admin console allow you to close a file and then download it? Could you just use that option as well? I mean, mind you, that means you have to take it offline, but is that an option?
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
So in the admin console, like there's the option to, when you go to the file, close the file, and then you say download the file.
Yeah, I mean that definitely excuse me, that definitely is an option for sure. That all definitely works.
Okay.
But a lot of times if you're needing to get a backup, a lot of times it's because the current file has some problem with it. So
Understood.
yeah. So at that point, I'd probably set up something like transmit, and you can actually, there's different ways of configuring it, but you can actually specify the SSH key in transmit. I'm just going to try and add to favorites. Okay, I guess I got to put it down here. And I would be doing, what do I be doing? Do I feel like it's not showing it to me? It's not showing me the right thing. Why is it not showing me the option I want? Oh. No. Well, I know I've done this. Hang on. It's not that one I want. It's this one I want. I guess it could, this is actually this system I've happened to have upgraded to Big Sur. I'm kind of wondering if maybe I've lost an option. So yeah, I can't show you, but basically you can, in kind of similar options, you can specify an SSH key and the account that you want to use, and then you can use the same GUI that you have right here. to go through the file system, the remote system, and easily copy the files back and forth. As I mentioned, or not as I mentioned, but as you might have seen, the FileMaker files are located here. And then if I wanted to actually get to a backup, if there was one, there isn't currently, that would be the path that I would be looking for, the default path that I'd be looking for FileMaker Server backups. I guess as another refinement, if I was deploying an actual production server, is I would probably, when I first did that initial configuration, I probably would have actually deployed the system with volumes. Actually, much how FileMaker Cloud did it. 2 volumes, and 1 volume will hold your OS and the FileMaker server binaries, and then have a second volume that has nothing but your data files and your perhaps either your data files and your backups, or maybe just your data files, depending on how you wanted to do it. Or you could even go farther and split it out into containers. And part of the reason why that's kind of nice is if the OS image gets tweaked in any way, or somebody accidentally deletes the entire contents of it or something like that, crazy like that, you'd still have the data, the actual database files in a separate volume. And then in addition, when you're doing your file system snapshots, you might want to back up your database, especially your backup folder. You might want to snapshot that frequently, but for the OS, maybe less so. You don't necessarily need to snapshot that every 2 hours or something like that. So perhaps every day is going to be, or every week is going to be frequent enough for that, and it can make a significant difference in how much your backups. I mean, the snapshot backups are relatively efficient and cheap, but still, all those backups can add up if you're not careful.
I have one. It's one of the factors weighing into what platform you decide to host on, especially if you're in an environment where you're doing active development, is how much friction there is to swap out, in a revised version of the file. So, and especially if you have large files, if you're talking 40, 60, 80 gig file, it is prohibitive in terms of downtime for you to bring a file down, download it to your thing, use the migration tool to, load it into a clone of the revised version, then upload this monster and then bring it back online. You're going to have a significant outage. And if you have people who use this thing all the time, that's not workable. And so to me, a huge consideration is, can I do data migration on the host itself so I don't have to have all these big upload and download times? And I was curious if anyone here had actually tried running the data migration tool on FS.
Yeah, interesting question. For what it's worth, I would say that if you're using something like AWS or perhaps something like vCenter for internal VM infrastructure, it's sometimes can be, when working with really larger amounts of data, it may be convenient to mount a volume that was previously attached to one server and just mount that image, that disk image, on another server while you perform some operation. And then I've done that in a few cases when I've been having to do recovery operations on really large FileMaker files. And so, yeah, that saved me the headache of trying to transfer, 40 gigs over the network. Doing the speed and the disk speed, that it's not a lot of time, but it can definitely add up. So it was nice.
Especially if you're trying to keep the file up.
Yeah. So it might in some VM systems, even depending on how the VM is configured, you might even be able to mount it on 2 different servers at the same time. So that could especially be handy.
Have you sort of landed on a best practice for like the deployment tool set? Are you thinking of using something like Terraform to spin up servers, or do you think Docker is a better way to go? Or what's your sort of most efficient process flow you've landed on?
Well, in the past, I wouldn't have recommended Docker because the performance for a larger system would not be very great. In fact, actually, they used to be essentially limited to a single core, but that issue's been dealt with. So they, in theory, they should be able to make better use of all the systems, all the available resources to that Docker environment. I guess I'm still inclined, though, as far as FileMaker is concerned, FileMaker Server is concerned, to just still inclined to do a full stack deployment. Again, being like a vCenter VM or an AWS VM, or whatever, choose your flavor. The Terraform definitely would be a nice way to go. Unfortunately, we've never, with, like I said, our clients are very wide and varied in their infrastructure and their platforms and everything. So we've never really been able to get off the ground as far as, we do make some use of Chef, which is, fairly similar in some respects to Terraform. But that's only been for internal servers, and we've never really been very good about being able to do that with client systems at this point. It would be nice to get that far. I suppose the other problem is just the overcoming the hump of getting through something like Terraform and using it well. Is I think another obstacle. There's always seems to be so many other things to look at. And as you saw, deploying FileMaker, is a pretty quick and easy process, I think. I think I probably spent half as much time talking about complications due to how AWS works as I did to the actual FileMaker server install itself, which was pretty straightforward. Possibly haven't tried it, but as we mentioned before, that configuration file is totally plain text. So I always thought, that might be an interesting experiment. What happens if I copy that configuration from server A onto server B? Would it work? It might be kind of an interesting experiment to see if that would be a quick way to just migrate a configuration very quickly from one server to another. I guess one area where that probably good chance that wouldn't work is if you were using EAR encryption at rest. I could definitely see that possibly being a problem there. Okay, well, if anybody else.
I forget the exact configuration, but isn't there, and maybe it's the Linux server where you can't install the file, I guess, yeah, it is the Linux. So you can't install the FileMaker client on Linux, unlike on Windows and Mac, where, if you need to open up a backup and restore a record that got accidentally smoked or something like that.
Yeah, recovery scenario, for instance. Yeah, you're out of luck. You're going to have to transfer that file. You're probably going to end up transferring that file over. I suppose you could, install something like Samba on there in order to allow file, set up as a file system, a file server temporarily, for instance. But yeah, I think in an interest of security and just keeping the system as uncomplicated as possible, I would probably just end up SCPing it or using transmit or something like that to copy it off the server. But yeah, as you mentioned before, if it's a really big file, that could be a little painful, depending on the situation. Yeah, I guess I should have mentioned too, that was maybe one kind of point, though, as far as if you have a client that's already got some VM infrastructure in place, then the really nice thing about setting up a server on Unix is it's really easy. It's really easy to get the disk image, and there's no cost associated with it. And you wouldn't necessarily have the right version. Maybe the client happens to be just using Ubuntu or something like that. But it shouldn't be hard to get them up and running on a CentOS system if they have an existing VM infrastructure. Yes, let's see. I don't know if there's been anything in the chat. Now that I can actually see the chat again.
Did you see the question about your keyboard? They're wondering what your keyboard is.
Yeah, I had a newer keyboard and oh, here, yeah, let's see. You can see it. This is an old Apple ADB. What did they call this thing? The extended keyboard 2. Yeah, I have an ADB USB converter, and yeah, I mean this thing was a real keyboard. Weighs about twice as much as the other one, and it's about maybe 50% as big as well. And I was surprised, actually. You can still find a lot of those USB to ADB converters out there. Or how did I say that? USB to ADB converter. Yeah, there's still a fair number of those out there, so it's actually not hard to find them.
There's a question if anyone had ever tried running a FileMaker client on Red Hat on Wine.
Tried FileMaker Server on Red Hat?
No, Red Hat FileMaker client.
Oh, using Wine. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Interesting experiment.
Yeah. I mean, it would be kind of interesting to know whether that works. As I understand it, Wine compatibility is pretty hit or miss. I do believe they have a kind of a list, though, of apps that are known to be compatible. I don't know if anybody's checked that before. I suppose one question that might come up if your clients are Mac based is right now is will FileMaker work on an M1 based CPU for emulation? So we've had at least a couple of people at our company have done some work on the SDK system, but I don't think anybody actually tried running FileMaker on it. So I haven't heard anything to see if it would work at all. That'd be kind of another kind of fun thing to try. And yeah, they do. There is Rosetta 2 is on it. So in theory, it might actually work.
Hey, has anyone heard any announcements from Claris about universal mode on the M1?
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah, I was kind of looking after Big Sur and the M1 CPU got announced. I was looking to see if there would be any announcements, but at least the last time I checked, there was nothing that I saw. I will say that having kind of being tuned into the plugin plugin development, that a while ago FileMaker implemented a universal, or sometimes called a FAT plugin. What's the word I'm looking for? So basically, you could put in multiple binaries in the same plugin package. And so you can already create a plugin that, at least in theory, I haven't actually done this yet, but you can, in theory, create a single plugin package that would work on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So would be surprised to find out if it didn't somehow also work with an M1 or ARM native version as well. But there are more complications on the Mac side because of code signing and notarization requirements, so that might possibly complicate things. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think I'd try. I might do it for fun, but if I do happen to get access to an M1 system sometime soon, but I would definitely be really reluctant to put a FileMaker server using one of those new CPUs into actual production use.
Could be fun.
ADB lives. Yep, it does. I don't know if anybody saw, David Simpson says that he has been he's been able to get FileMaker Pro to work on the developer transition kit. And Rosetta 2. So so far working for him. I will say too that I haven't noticed any major issues using Big Sur on an Intel system, but there do seem to be some minor user interface glitches at the very least. So I don't know for sure if some of that was due to me using the pre one of the beta versions, but so it could have been actually an OS bug as opposed to a FileMaker issue with Big Sur. But I guess I'm kind of also interested what FileMaker's statement is going to be as far as Big Sur and FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server. All right. Well, I guess I was worried about having enough to say, but I guess I kind of talked this to death.
Yeah. Well, a couple glitches and. Well, thank you, Simon.
Yeah. Well, I hope it was helpful. I think it's I think it's definitely doable. So you're probably gonna have to learn, if you haven't done a deployment on a Linux server before. You're definitely gonna have to learn a few things, but don't be afraid of it, and just don't expect it to necessarily work perfectly the first time.
All right. Well, I guess we're gonna get ready to go ahead and stop the recording and say goodbye.